A girl is pushed onto a stage in front of 300 people. A giant screen erupts to life behind her, playing twisted, edited footage of her private life. The crowd laughs. Her best friends laugh. She drops to her knees. Then, the sound of a chair. The most dangerous man in the room stands up. Come with me, and I'll keep you safe. Or walk away, and I disappear from your life. She had 40 minutes of knowing him and 3 years of being protected by him. She had exactly 10 seconds to decide.
Before the story takes a darker turn, I just want to say thank you to everyone supporting this channel. Your likes, your time, your presence here, it means everything. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now would be the perfect moment, because what's coming next, you don't want to miss it.
The room was dead silent. The giant screen in the center of the hall had just gone black. Only seconds ago, it had been glowing with her secrets, her private life, and her deepest pain. The crowd had been laughing, a cruel, sharp sound that filled the air. But now, no one made a sound. A man stood up in the VIP section. He was tall, calm, dangerous. Everyone in the city knew his face, but no one dared to say his name out loud. He didn't shout. He didn't look angry. He simply walked forward. Every step he took on the polished floor made the air feel heavier, like a storm was about to break. On the stage, her knees were shaking. Tears ran down her face, hot and stinging. She couldn't even look up at the people who had just destroyed her reputation. Then she felt a shadow. The man stepped beside her. He stood close enough to shield her body from every camera and every mocking eye in the room. He looked out at the crowd. His eyes were cold, sharp, and completely unforgiving. A chill ran through the room as people realized the laughter was a mistake. Someone in the back dropped their glass, and the sound of breaking shards was like a gunshot. Then he spoke. His voice was low, but it reached every corner of the hall. You exposed the wrong girl. He turned and gently pulled her closer to his side. He held her like she belonged there, like she was suddenly under the protection of the most dangerous man in the room. Her eyes widened in total shock. She had never seen this man before in her life. She wondered, why was he doing this? Why did the people who just heard her suddenly look like they wanted to run for their lives? What did this man know that she didn't? If you think this moment changed everything, you aren't ready for what happened before the lights went out. Wait until you see the secret that started it all 6 hours earlier. 6 hours before the world fell apart, she was smiling. The sun was shining, and she was laughing with her friends in a room filled with music and light. Everything felt normal. Everything felt safe. She stood in front of the mirror, fixing the fabric of her dress. It wasn't an expensive gown, just something simple and pretty, but it made her feel special. Tonight was the big school event, the kind of night every girl dreams about. Her best friend walked into the room wearing a wide, bright grin. You have to come on stage later, her friend said, leaning against the doorframe. They picked you for a surprise. The girl's eyes lit up with excitement. A surprise? For me? She asked, her heart fluttering with hope. Her friend nodded quickly, perhaps a little too quickly. Yeah, everyone is excited, she replied, glancing away for a split second. In that moment, a strange feeling washed over her. The air in the room felt different for a heartbeat. She caught a quick look exchanged between the other girls in the room, a silent message she didn't understand. But she shook it off and ignored the knot forming in her stomach. These were her friends, her inner circle. They would never do anything to hurt her, right? As they walked out of the room together, her heels clicking on the floor, she heard a faint whisper from someone behind her. "Make sure the video is ready," the voice hissed. She stopped in her tracks. "Did you say something?" she asked, turning around. Her friends just smiled, their faces perfect masks of kindness. "Nothing. Come on, you're gonna love tonight." She forced a smile back and kept walking. But deep inside, a small, cold fear started to grow. What video were they talking about? If you were her, would you have trusted them? Or would you have walked away right then and there? Don't miss the next chapter, because the perfect setup is about to begin. The hall was absolutely full. Lights were shining, the music was loud, and the sound of people laughing filled the air. On the surface, everything looked perfect, but it was too perfect. She sat with her friends at a table near the front, trying to enjoy the atmosphere. But something was off. Her friends weren't looking at the stage. They were constantly checking their phones. They were whispering to each other and laughing at things they refused to show her. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Of course," they snapped back quickly. "Tonight is your night." Her heart began to beat faster. She wondered if this was really about her or if something else was happening. Then her eyes drifted across the room to the VIP section. A man sat there alone. He was quiet, just watching. Unlike everyone else in the hall, he wasn't smiling. His eyes moved slowly across the room until they stopped directly on her. She felt the weight of that look. It was cold, but it didn't feel cruel. It felt like he was trying to understand a puzzle. Terrified by the intensity, she quickly looked away. "Who is that?" she whispered to her friend. Her friend stiffened immediately. "Don't look at him," she said, her voice sharp and fast. "Just ignore him." But why? Why did the most powerful man in the room have his eyes fixed on her? Before she could ask another question, the host grabbed the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began. The room grew silent as the spotlight moved. "We have a special surprise tonight." Her friends turned to her, their smiles stretching too wide across their faces. "Go on," they urged. "It's your moment." Her chest tightened with a sudden, overwhelming sense of dread. Something was wrong. Very wrong. She tried to step back, but it was too late. They pushed her. She was stumbling toward the stage, and the screen behind her was about to flicker to life. The trap was set. The screen lit up with a blinding flash. At first, it was quiet. Nothing but a blurry, shaky clip that made the audience lean in with curiosity. But then, the image cleared. Suddenly, her face appeared on the giant display. It wasn't a professional photo or a tribute. It was her private voice in her most personal, guarded moments. The crowd stayed confused for only a heartbeat. Then, a single laugh broke the silence. "Wait, is that really her?" someone whispered loudly. Another voice joined in, shouting, "No way! Play it louder!" The host obeyed. The volume went up, and every word she had ever said in private began to echo through the massive hall. But it wasn't the truth. The footage had been twisted and edited to make her look like someone she wasn't, to make her look wrong. Her heart stopped as she realized what was happening. No, that's not," she stammered, turning around and shaking her head in desperation. "Stop it! That's not real!" But the host didn't stop. He only smiled a cold, professional smile. The crowd began to whisper, and then the whispers turned into a roar of laughter. Phones came out of pockets as people started recording the humiliation. Her hands trembled so hard she could barely hold them still, and her legs felt like they would give way at any second. In her panic, she looked toward the table where her friends sat. She expected to see horror on their faces. Instead, they were laughing too. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. That is when the freezing truth hit her. This wasn't a technical glitch or a mistake. They had planned this entire night to destroy her. Why? She whispered into the noise, but no one answered her. The video kept playing, and it was getting much, much worse. What else did they put in that video to break her? Don't blink, because the next chapter is where everything falls apart completely. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. It wasn't just lighthearted laughter anymore. The sound became louder, sharper, and much crueler. Voices from the crowd began to cut through the music like knives. "Wow, she's fake," someone sneered. "I always knew something was off," another added, while a third person shouted, "Look at her now!" Each word hit her like a physical slap. She stood on that stage, exposed and vulnerable, covering her ears to block out the noise. "Please, stop, please," she sobbed, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. The cruelty only grew. Someone stood up and began to clap slowly, mocking her pain, while another voice challenged her. "Say something! Defend yourself!" Tears streamed down her face as she tried to find her voice. "I didn't do this. They changed it. It's not true," she whispered. But the crowd was a roaring ocean of noise, and her voice was far too small to be heard. The host stepped closer, a predatory smile on his face, and nudged her with the microphone. "Come on," he said. "Tell us the truth." She backed away, shaking her head, but there was nowhere to go. The stage felt like it was shrinking, the spotlights felt hotter, and the laughter felt like it would never end. Then, the ultimate betrayal happened. Her best friend walked up onto the stage and took the microphone. She was smiling, the same smile the girl had trusted her entire life. "We just wanted everyone to see who she really is," the friend announced to the room. The crowd gasped before erupting into even louder laughter. The girl's breath caught in her throat. That face and that voice belonged to the person she trusted most, and now that person had destroyed her. Her knees finally gave out and she dropped to the floor, broken, humiliated, and completely alone. But in the middle of that deafening noise, something changed. A sharp, loud sound cut through the room. The sound of a heavy chair scraping across the floor. The laughter began to fade into a confused silence. Someone had just stood up, and this time it wasn't for entertainment. The next moment is the one that changes everything. The sound of the chair scraping against the floor echoed like a crack of thunder. Everyone turned their heads. One by one, the eyes of the crowd shifted toward the VIP section. The man was standing now. He was tall, still, and watching with an intensity that made the air feel heavy, like a storm was moments away from breaking. The laughter died instantly. People slowly lowered their phones, the screens going dark as the atmosphere shifted from mockery to pure tension. Even the host, who had been enjoying the spectacle moments ago, looked unsure. Please, sit down," he stammered nervously into the mic. But the man didn't move back. He stepped forward. His pace was slow and calm. Each step he took made the silence in the hall deeper and more suffocating. You could hear the faint tap of heels, the clinking of shaking glasses, and the heavy breathing of a crowd that was suddenly terrified. The girl looked up through her blurred, tear-filled vision. She could see him coming toward the stage, but her mind was racing. Why was the most dangerous man in the city walking toward her? The host tried to intervene one last time. "Sir, this is a private event." The man didn't even glance at him. He reached the stage and stepped up with a terrifying grace. In one smooth, silent motion, he grabbed the remote and turned off the giant screen. Darkness. Silence. The video was gone. The laughter was dead, and the world seemed to stop spinning. He turned his gaze to the crowd. His eyes were cold, dangerous, and final. No one dared to breathe, let alone speak. Then he looked down at her. It wasn't a look of pity or shame. It was something else entirely, something no one expected. He reached out his hand toward her and said two quiet words. "Stand up." Her heart pounded against her ribs as her trembling fingers reached out. She hesitated, then slowly placed her hand in his. The moment their skin touched, the entire room held its breath. Everyone felt it. Something powerful had just begun, and the people who laughed were about to regret every second of it. Her hand was still in his, feeling warm, steady, and unexpectedly safe. The room stayed frozen in a heavy silence, as if the air itself had turned to lead. No one in the crowd dared to speak or even whisper. They simply watched as the most feared man in the city helped her stand up. He moved slowly and carefully, treating her like she truly mattered. Then he turned his attention back to the crowd. His eyes had returned to that terrifying coldness, sharp enough to cut through anyone standing in his way. "Who made that video?" he asked. Not a single person answered. The silence was so deep you could hear the heartbeat of the person standing next to you. The host, desperate to save the night, forced a shaky, nervous laugh. "Sir, this is just a joke," he started to say. But the man shifted his gaze. Just one look was all it took. The host froze instantly, his words vanishing as pure fear took their place. The man spoke again, his voice low and dangerous. "I don't repeat myself." In the audience, a chair scraped against the floor. Someone stood up, shaking violently. I didn't mean..." The person stammered. "Sit," the man commanded. The person dropped back into their seat immediately, as if their body had no choice but to obey his voice. The girl's heart raced as she looked at him. Who was this man, and why was everyone so terrified of him? Then he did something that sent a ripple of shock through the room. He stepped closer and placed his hand gently on her shoulder, claiming her in front of everyone. He spoke loud enough for every ear in the hall to hear. "From this moment, she stands with me." Panic and whispers spread like wildfire. Everyone knew what that sentence meant. She was now under his protection, and anyone who crossed her was inviting a war with a monster. She looked up at him, her mind spinning in confusion. "Why are you helping me?" she whispered. For a split second, his mask of stone slipped, and his expression turned soft, almost familiar. "You'll understand soon," he said. What did he mean? If you think this was just about protection, you aren't ready to find out who she really is. The room was no longer the same. The laughter that had filled the hall just minutes ago was dead. Now there was only fear. Her friends stood frozen in place, their faces turning pale as they realized the gravity of the situation. One of them, desperate to fix the mistake, tried to force a smile. "This is going too far," she stammered, her voice shaking. "We were just having fun." The man turned slowly toward her. "Fun?" he repeated. The words sounded wrong coming from him. heavy, dark, and dangerous. He took a step closer to the girl who had spoken, and she instinctively backed away until she hit a table behind her. There was nowhere left for her to run. "Do you call this fun?" he asked, his voice low but terrifyingly calm. He didn't need to shout to make her tremble. She started shaking, whispering, "I'm sorry, we didn't know." "You knew," he said simply. He looked at the rest of the group, his gaze like ice. All of you knew. No one dared to move because they understood, far too late, that they had picked the wrong girl. The man turned to one of his associates standing near the entrance. "Lock it," he commanded. A loud, heavy click echoed through the hall as the doors were sealed shut. Panic spread through the crowd like a fever. People began to cry out, asking why they were being locked in and begging to leave, but no one could move. The girl stood there, still holding onto his arm, her heart racing as the situation grew much bigger than she ever expected. She looked up at him and whispered, "Please, don't hurt them." The entire room went silent again, staring at her in shock. Why would she protect them after what they did? He studied her face for a moment, seeing something important in her eyes, and finally gave a small nod. "Fine," he said. Relief rushed through the room, but it was short-lived. "Then we'll let the truth hurt them instead," he added. The relief vanished instantly. What truth was he about to reveal that could be worse than his anger? He let go of her hand, but only for a moment. He stepped forward, his presence commanding the attention of every soul in the room. "You wanted to show everyone who she is," he said, his voice cutting through the thick layer of fear. "Now I'll do the same." A chill ran through the room as he raised his hand slightly. One of his men stepped forward with a tablet and tapped the screen. The big screen behind them, which had previously shown her humiliation, flickered back to life. The crowd gasped, and someone shouted for it to be turned off. But it was too late. A new video began to play. This time, the footage wasn't about her. It was about them. The screen displayed hidden recordings and private messages of her so-called friends laughing and planning the setup. It showed them editing her videos and twisting her words to make her look like a villain. One voice stood out clearly over the speakers. "She trusts us too much. This will be easy." The room exploded into whispers of shock and disbelief. Her eyes widened as she turned to look at the people she had loved and trusted. They couldn't even meet her gaze anymore. One of them broke down, crying out, "It was just a joke! We didn't think it would go this far!" But the damage was done. The truth was out. Everyone could see that she was never the problem. They were. Tears filled her eyes again, but they felt different this time. She didn't feel weak or broken. She felt a new sense of strength. She looked at the man beside her and whispered, "You knew." He nodded once and replied, "I always do." Then she asked the question that changed everything. "How do you know so much about me?" The room held its breath as he went still. For the first time, he didn't answer right away. He stepped closer, lowered his voice, and said, "Because this isn't the first time I've watched over you." Her heart stopped. What did that mean? When had he been watching her, and why? The room felt frozen as his words hung in the air. "I've been watching you." She stepped back slowly, her breath shaking as she looked at him with wide, confused eyes. "What do you mean?" she asked. He didn't answer right away, instead turning his gaze back to the screen where the truth of her betrayal had just been exposed. When he looked at her again, his expression was calm, heavy, and certain. 3 years ago, he said, his voice echoing through the silent hall, there was an incident. She narrowed her eyes, trying to grab a flickering memory that felt just out of reach. "You were there," he continued, taking a step toward her, "and you didn't even know what you stopped." The room was so quiet that even the guilty ones stopped moving, desperate to hear the connection between this innocent girl and the city's most dangerous man. "You helped someone you didn't know," he explained, "and because of that, I made a promise." Her heart beat faster against her ribs as the pieces started to fall into place. "A promise?" she whispered.
He nodded once, his eyes locking onto hers. "I would never let anything happen to you again." A sharp silence followed his words. She felt a rush of heat to her face, realizing that her protector hadn't appeared by chance. He had been her silent shadow for years. Then she asked the question that finally broke the mystery open. "Who are you? Really?" He paused. For the first time since he stood up, his mask of stone slipped just a little, revealing the man behind the legend. What he said next made the entire room hold its breath, because the truth behind his identity was only the beginning.
He turned slightly, facing the entire crowd now, not just her. The tension in the hall was so thick, it felt like it might snap. And then he said it. He said his name. The moment the name left his lips, the entire room changed instantly. Whispers exploded like a series of small bombs throughout the hall. "No way," someone breathed. "It's him," another whispered in terror. "That's impossible." The name alone carried enough weight to crush the spirit of everyone in the room.
The color drained from the host's face until he looked like a ghost, and even her friends scrambled backward, trying to put distance between themselves and the man they had unknowingly provoked. Fear spread through the crowd like fire in a dry forest. The girl looked around, her head spinning. "What is going on?" she asked, but no one answered her. They didn't need to answer because now they knew the truth. The man standing beside her was not just powerful or dangerous. He was the kind of man people only spoke about in hushed silences. The kind of man who didn't need to shout because his mere presence was enough to bring an empire to its knees. He looked back at her, his gaze softening just for her. "I found you by accident once," he said, his voice low and intimate. "And after that, I couldn't stop watching over you." Her voice trembled as she looked into his eyes. "Why me?" she asked. There was a long, heavy pause. Then he spoke the words that made the room gasp. "Because you saved my life," without knowing it. She froze, her mind racing to understand. But before she could respond, a loud crash thundered from the back of the hall. The heavy doors burst open, and a group of men rushed in. Security? Or perhaps something much worse. The atmosphere shifted instantly from a trial to a battlefield. Whatever was coming next was not part of the plan. Everything is collapsing into the final moment. Are you ready for the choice that changes everything? The new men entered the hall fast, moving with a precision that signaled true danger. Tension exploded in the room like a powder keg. "Step away from her," the leader of the new group ordered, his voice echoing with authority. The crowd panicked, people crying out in confusion. "What's happening and who are they?" But the man standing beside her didn't move an inch. He stayed positioned directly in front of her, shielding her once again with a calm, unshaken resolve. The leader of the new group pointed a finger at him, his face twisted in a sneer. "This doesn't concern you anymore," he barked.
A heavy silence followed. Then the man replied, his voice like cold steel. "It does now."
The air turned heavy and dangerous as two powerful worlds collided right there on the stage. She stood in the very middle of the chaos, her hands shaking as she looked at the weapons and the hardened faces of the newcomers. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rising noise. "I don't understand any of this." The man turned to her, and for the first time that night, his voice softened completely. "You don't have to understand everything tonight," he said gently, "but you have to choose." Her eyes widened as the world seemed to slow down. Choose what? He stepped closer to her and said the words that froze everything in time. "Come with me, and I'll keep you safe forever." He paused, letting the weight of the offer settle before adding the alternative. "Or walk away, and I disappear from your life." Her heart felt like it was breaking in two. Behind her was the fear of the unknown, and in front of her was a life of danger, but also the only truth she had left. She looked at the chaos, and then at the people who had betrayed her so cruelly. Slowly, with a trembling breath, she made her choice. Her hand reached forward toward his. Suddenly, the screen cut to black. What she chose that night didn't just change her life, it started a war that no one was ready for. The moral center of this story explores the duality of betrayal and redemption, emphasizing that true character is revealed not in moments of celebration, but under the pressure of a crisis. The danger of false trust. The narrative serves as a cautionary tale about the nature of friendship. The protagonist's friends represent the ultimate form of cruelty. People who use intimacy as a weapon to facilitate a public downfall. Their actions highlight a painful truth. Betrayal often comes from those we trust most, driven by envy or a desire for entertainment at another's expense. Integrity amidst injustice? A significant moral lesson lies in the protagonist's response to her tormentors. Even after being humiliated and broken, she pleads with her protector not to hurt those who destroyed her. This dangerous mercy showcases her inherent goodness. She refuses to let the cruelty of others turn her into someone cruel. Her strength isn't found in revenge, but in her unwavering empathy. The power of silent observation. The Mafia boss represents the idea that acts of kindness are never truly lost. Because the protagonist helped a stranger 3 years prior without seeking reward, she unknowingly secured a lifelong guardian. This suggests that genuine goodness creates ripples that eventually return to protect us in our darkest hours. Ultimately, the story teaches that while the world can be unforgiving and friends can be false, integrity and quiet courage will eventually attract the protection and justice they deserve.